Hey everyone, and welcome to the Natural World Weekly, the show where we learn about the wonder of our natural world through science and animals. My name is Avery. I'm a biochem student here at UIC, and every week on this show, I'll walk you through a bizarre animal and an interesting natural phenomenon, and you do not need to be a scientist to understand this podcast. I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode. Today, we'll be talking about a bald rodent that is immune to cancer that I actually have personal experience with, and the recent Artemis II launch and why we're going back to the moon. This week's animal is the naked mole rat, which, by the way, I highly recommend looking up a photo of if you don't know what they look like. They kind of look like a sphinx cat and a rat combined, but if the rat had massive buck teeth fangs sticking out of his mouth also. Their skin really is like a sphinx cat texture. It's wrinkly and vaguely testicular. If you ever watched Kim Possible growing up, Ron's pet Rufus is a naked mole rat. And I think the Underminer from The Incredibles is loosely based on them. They not only look really weird, but they also have a ton of different unique characteristics, including the fact that they're essentially the only animal on Earth that's basically immune to cancer. But we'll start with the basics. Naked mole rats are rodents native to West Africa, and they live entirely in underground tunnels that they construct by scratching with their big buck teeth incisors. Those teeth are strong enough to dig through hard stone and rock in the deeper underground parts where they live. Like previous animals featured, they're super strong, specifically with their teeth, despite being only 3 inches long and weighing like an ounce on average. So what are some of the unique characteristics they have? Other than being bald, blind, and chopped. I got the soundboard back. My personal favorite of their weird characteristics is that mole rats are the only rodents known to be eusocial. Eusocial is like the fancy science word for the social structure that like bees and ants have, the queen and the workers. It's funny because it's definitely something associated with insects, but there's naked mole rats, there's another type of mole rat that does this, there's a shrimp, a worm, and even a fern that are all eusocial. But the insect examples are definitely the most common, and those are bees, wasps, ants, and termites. Specifically with naked mole rats, there's colonies that are usually like 70 rats, with a queen rat that's relatively easy to spot since she's bigger than the rest and will always be surrounded by quote-unquote guards. The queen is the sole baby rat producer, and once the queen dies or is removed from the colony for whatever reason, multiple of the bigger female worker rats will fight to the death, and the victor will become the new reigning monarch. I really love eusocial animals because it shows how strangely human some animal behavior can be. The workers, which are both female and male adults, specialize in all the different tasks that need to be done in order to maintain the colony, like childcare, burrowing further down, maintaining the tunnels, and foraging for food. Speaking of, they eat underground plants that the workers find. They really don't need to ever come up to the surface for any reason. They also have an additional caste of soldier rats that are made up of like the bigger, stockier ones who work to prevent the colony from any dangers. They mainly have to watch out for snakes since they're the only predator that can really dig that far. And once one is spotted, they coordinate together to either try to fight it off or to defend the colony by like digging or constructing barriers of rocks and dirt. And most queens were once female soldiers who fought for the vacancy position. Another strange thing about them is that they're essentially cold-blooded, like snakes and lizards. They don't have any way to regulate their own body temperature, so they rely on other sources. What's weird about that is that, again, there's no other rodent or even mammal that's cold-blooded. But, of course, they're underground, so they can't, soak in the sun on a rock like lizards do. So instead what they do is they basically just stay huddled together 24/7. The last weird thing I have about mole rats is their lifespan. For reference, wild rats and mice live like less than a year. Squirrels usually live about like 2 to 3 years. Moles can live anywhere from like 2 to 5. And these naked mole rats live 10 to 30 years in the wild, not even under human care. That is insane and not seen in any other small rodent. And like not even in big rodents. Capybaras, they live like 8 years. This is a big reason why, despite, the drastic effects of stuff like habitat loss, local conflicts, climate change on their native range, and virtually every other animal around, their conservation status is actually listed as least concern. They are just very powerful beings. So why do they live so long? There are many, many factors to this, but one major one, of course, being what I alluded to earlier, the fact that they are virtually immune to cancer. And we know it's all thanks to a sugar called hyaluronan, also known as hyaluronic acid, the thing that you might have heard of because they put it in skincare treatments. Hyaluronan is something produced by all animals naturally, and it basically keeps joints lubricated and functioning, as well as being found in skin and cartilage. Naked mole rats have specialized hyaluronan that is 5 times bigger than the hyaluronan found in humans and rodents similar to naked mole rats. And there's also a lot more present in their bodies. The main theory about why this is because they live and move through tight tunnels made of rigid walls, so their skin being like elastic and wrinkly is beneficial. But how does having more goo help with preventing cancer? Tumors actually form when mutated cells that can grow and split as much as they want end up finding each other, where they stick together and start dividing rapidly together. But if there's a bunch of like lubricating gel coating the cells, then they're way less likely to actually stick together and form a tumor. This may sound a little out there, but scientists literally observed this happen in a petri dish with naked mole rat cells. When they took away the goo, the tumor formation would happen, and when they limited the production of hyaluronan in their bodies, their natural cancer immunity went away. It's super interesting to me to think about this from a potential human medicine perspective. This very well could eventually be used as a potential cancer preventative treatment or medicine. Of course, there are issues and limitations of how to implement this practically, which is illustrated by the fact that this initial paper I described is over 10 years old. And if you haven't noticed already, there's no goo that you can take to cure cancer. But who knows? One day I'd like to think that they'd be the key to solving one of humanity's greatest problems. I hope you enjoyed learning about maybe the most unique animal alive. It's one especially near and dear to me since I actually volunteered for a lab my freshman year that had 2 naked mole rat colonies. I did spend a lot of time with them, but my personal favorite part was trimming down their buck teeth with a tiny Dremel. In the wild, they naturally shave down their teeth by all the digging they do, but in captivity, you have to shave it off with a drill. It was fun, although definitely pretty scary to be their dentist. Now we're going to pivot over to the science segment where we're going to talk about the very, very exciting Artemis II launch and what the future of space exploration is looking like. We are so back. We have officially made it back into space with Artemis II. I'm really excited about our return to the moon. And of course, it's nice to cover some topical science news. So let's go over the general plan of the Artemis II mission and what's next for NASA. What are they researching? What's the main deal? The Artemis program, which is named after the Greek goddess Artemis, goddess of the moon, is a set of missions all for the goal of returning humans to the surface of the moon in 2028. Further from that, there's also the general goal of getting more lunar missions after that, and eventually a mission to Mars. Artemis I already happened in November 2022, and it was basically just an unmanned test of the rocket that they were planning on using for future missions. The Orion spacecraft flew to the moon and circled it twice before returning home by being naturally pulled in by Earth's gravity, which they calculated for. That was the whole plan. The mission went perfectly. So now we have Artemis II currently happening. Artemis II is virtually the same, except it has a crew of 4 astronauts on board, and the mission only involves 1 flyby, so it's about half the total mission time. Right now, as I'm recording this episode, they are currently en route to the moon and will arrive in about 2 days. By the time this episode actually comes out, though, because I record this a week in advance, the mission should hopefully be successfully completed. Yeah, fingers crossed. Of course, the main idea with this mission is, test the Orion spacecraft with a crew, but there's also a lot of really interesting experiments being done by the astronauts to prepare for future longer missions, possibly to Mars. A big issue with that is that we still don't really understand the effects of space on humans, but we do know that it's not easy on the body. This is a huge priority for NASA, arguably priority number 1, since these effects are one of, if not the biggest obstacle between us and putting a person on Mars. NASA has made a beautiful acronym containing all of the major areas of damage that space causes on humans that we'll be talking about. And the acronym is RIDGE, which stands for space radiation, isolation and confinement, distance from Earth, gravity fields, and hostile/closed environments. I don't know, hopefully you got from the way I talked. NASA is not known for being great with concise acronyms. The radiation part is really interesting and is actually being directly tested on Artemis II. The radiation in deep space is pretty different from what you get on Earth. On Earth, we have an atmosphere and a magnetic field to shield us from stuff coming off the sun and from deep space. But obviously, when you're in space, you don't have that anymore. These effects stack way higher on a potential Mars mission that would have a way, way longer travel time, potentially be a 2-year thing. And then on Artemis II specifically, how they're testing this is that they have radiation detecting machines and shields to monitor how much they'll be getting over the course of 10 days and to test out this new technology. Then the isolation and confinement and distance from Earth areas, the I and the D, are not really being directly tested because those are more about longer missions. And of course, this is a 10-day thing. But isolation and confinement is the area more so about, the mental effects of being on a closed spacecraft for such a long time. This is a way bigger concern than it may seem, especially for longer missions. But again, they're not really doing much in this area for Artemis II, considering it's just 10 days. But for longer, people go up to the space station for about 6 months. They have a bunch of initiatives, they have space gardens and activities and, stuff so that they don't go insane just hovering over Earth for 6 months. Distance from Earth is pretty self-explanatory. There's 2 main issues with that. One is that there's going to be a communication delay, as it goes into space. And then also, you're going away from Earth, so you have to pack everything that you need. You'll need medical supplies, you need enough food rations, et cetera, et cetera. But again, it's a 10-day thing, so nothing new really going on there. Obviously, gravity fields is something that plays into this, especially considering a Mars mission, since, transitioning from gravity on Earth to low gravity to Mars gravity, it's a lot for the body to handle. And so they are testing some medicines and potential physical therapies on Artemis I to, help that transition a little better, but there's not much to really be said there. Pretty self-explanatory. And then finally, the hostile/closed environment, which is the E. I know it's really confusing, is more so about the microbial environment in space. And NASA is really interested in learning about, the immunology of how microbes survive in space and how potentially medicine could still be delivered in space. A really cool example of a study on this was during the infamous, or maybe not infamous because it went well, the famous twin study that NASA did, where they took one twin up into space for a year and then studied the same twin on Earth to see the effects of space, and during which the twin in space gave himself a flu shot and was monitored, and we found that nothing was different. Like, everything worked the same. Flu shot worked. There's no adverse effects. So yeah, this is something really important and will also be studied on Artemis. So then what's next if this goes well? Well, Artemis II is set for 2028, and it will be the same type of rocket, except humans will actually be getting out of the aircraft to go walk on the moon again. And then, of course, potentially more repeat missions similar if that one goes well, all hoping that these go well. And then finally, the end goal of getting to go to Mars. Very, very exciting. Thank you all so much for watching this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk about naked mole rats, as I have personal experience with them, and I think they're really cool. I hope to see you all next week. Reminder that all sources will be linked in the description. And until next week, remember to stay kind and curious.